Thank you, everyone, for coming into the committee room tonight. We're now going to pick up with item 9B on our workshop agenda, which is a continued discussion of our long-range planning process. Thank you for being here and participating in that process. As we typically do, I'll ask Manager Fieldman to introduce the next segment of this discussion. Mr. Fieldman.
This is the fourth and final meeting, and tonight we're not talking so much about strategies, but how to implement them. And tonight is our discussion about action items. Last July, this council put together a work plan of priority action items that would last for this iteration of the council from July of 2013 through about May 1st of 2015. We identified about 15 high and medium priority projects that the staff and the council have been working on. And we have represented them in a little chart here that's difficult to read from the back, but we handed out hard copies of this chart. It's on page 4-2 of the report. This report, this graphic, is really sort of a Gantt chart for you urban planners out there. But the bars represent the work plan in terms of length of time. So it starts in the fourth quarter of 2013 and runs through the second quarter of 2015. The dashed line running right through the middle of the chart is the approximate location of today's date. That's where we are in time. So any project with a bar that rests completely on the left side of the dashed line means we should be done. And I'm proud to report that that is the case. Any of the projects that should have been completed by now have been completed, and they are indicated with a check mark on the left-hand side. All the other projects will be ongoing past this date. I'm also pleased to report that we are on schedule with these projects. We have started all of these projects. They are in various levels of completion. Some of them are part of public discussion now. Others will become public later according to the timelines here. So we're on schedule on all items. The items that are indicated with a 15 in a box on the right-hand side of the description, if you can see that little box with the 15, that indicates that we are scheduled to be working on these projects from now until about May 1st of 2015. So we still have a significant amount of work to be done in the existing high and medium priority action items. What we'd like to do tonight is have a discussion, a dialogue among staff, council, and the community, just to verify, are these the projects that we should be working on from now until May of 2015, and in some cases beyond? There are no new projects identified, but we did want to have the opportunity for the council to look. We're about halfway through. What does the second half of this work plan look like? So we're happy to entertain any questions and comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Well, I'll just start off, but then reserve the right to come back later, as I always do. And I don't disagree with any of the projects that are on the list. I think we're talking to the same 7 people who, through a discussion and collaborative environment work group, came to a consensus as to what they ought to be. And I doubt that that's changed significantly, but perhaps I'll be wrong and we'll hear otherwise. I know there are some of them that are indicated as completed, and the discussion was to identify options for doing something, and I don't know when we want to take up and then implementing those options. For example, the potential relocation of the methadone clinic. Identifying the options has been completed. The next step would be to proceed with what has been identified. That's certainly something that I would continue to support. And then the only other thing I would point out would be, for now, is, and again, I continue to think it doesn't even rise to the level of that chart, but there can be a difference of opinion, which is getting in place a mobile vendor ordinance that would deal with, would deal with a number of things. If we don't make it too complicated, we can probably get it done. But if it turns into another multi-meeting, multi-month discussion like with the foul ordinance, then perhaps it bears more discussion as to whether it can fit in or not.
If I could just highlight one item with that.
Sure.
There is actually a children's book at Barnes & Noble all about food trucks. And I actually shared it with Mike and Dave. So
It's child's play is what you're saying.
I don't know if it's child's play. I'm not implying
It
that.
certainly seemed the policies were very straightforward in the children's book, so I don't think we take it on. It's that easy.
I bet you it ended well, too.
Yes.
Everybody was fed well.
So with that sort of, not really intended to be nothing more than an opening comment introduction, I'll just throw it open for others to respond to the manager's question about, are we on track? Are we still doing what we should be doing? And other thoughts in that regard. Commissioner Olson?
Just to jump in real quick, I mean, I am very pleased by the staff progress in all these projects so far. And I think that it's important that we stay on track and we continue to follow through with many of these projects, which we haven't completed yet. And so I'm very hesitant to throw anything new on there while I have some new ideas. I think that we came up with a great list of priorities last year, and I look forward to us executing those priorities through the remainder of the next year or so. And then at that time, once this plan is completed, then we'll have another opportunity to revisit this. So I think that my feeling is we're on track. Let's keep on moving with these items and go forward from there. So that's my thought.
In sum, on track, maintain present course and speed.
Correct.
Understood.
Dave, when do you expect the next list or the next new action item meeting to take place? Would that be around now next year?
Probably about this time, right after the next iteration of the council is sworn in. Obviously, if there are a lot of new faces in the council, we have to proceed more slowly. If there's not so many, if there are new faces, it takes some time. If it's a continuation of this group, we'll probably just keep rolling through. So June, July.
And what do you feel like is the last two on the list, lead role and partnerships and membership in DuPage mayors and managers? Actually, I'll add another couple in there, maybe one more, the collective bargaining. I mean, those things are always happening. Do we feel like they need to put themselves on this list? I mean, they are definitely high priorities, but is it more of it's every day? It's something that we're doing all the time. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm trying to take three things off the list so we can make room.
Take number 2 off. So are we always continuing to improve resident engagement and communication?
Yeah, but I guess the question is more of a kind of an internal operational process question, which is probably something that you don't like me to ask at a meeting like this.
No.
But I think this is the time to kind of hear a little bit about that, and how do those 2 or 3, or as Martin said, maybe 4 now, play into the overall scheme going forward?
Let's take lead role in partnerships and cooperation. Not really a specific project listed under this headline. It's sort of how we do business. So that one, I think, can come off the list. And when it comes off the list, it doesn't mean we stop doing them. It means it's part of our DNA. It's part of our day-to-day activity. Leverage membership in DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference. I would recommend that this stay on the list. We are uniquely positioned to do several specific projects at the DMMC, which benefit not only the village, but all the member municipalities. Mayor Tully is the president of that organization. I'm the secretary-treasurer. I'm the head of the Budget and Operations Committee. Enza, Mike Baker, others play lead roles, Nan Newland. We could take the time to list out the specific projects we're doing there. However, we are investing very significant staff time to achieve this. And my concern is that this one comes off the list. It's really not part of our everyday ongoing. And if it comes off the list, we would literally stop working on those things and take resources and move them. That's why this ended up being a priority action item.
Okay.
So we would interpret, if you took that one off the list, we would literally dial down our involvement. And I think we're too well positioned now to make measurable change. I would not recommend that.
Although I would interject that at some point in time we would be able to dial down because the change will have been implemented and become part of the DNA of the other organization.
Of the other organization. Right. So when Mayor Tully serves his 1-year term, I serve a 1-year term, and we move on, I think then
right.
we've
by necessity, we'll be dialing it down.
The continue to improve resident engagement and communication, as a general concept, we're always doing that. We've been improving that for years and years, and we won't stop. There's a specific project that we've been working on, a way to better engage residents through a customer relations management software or set of tools that we're spending a significant amount of time on, and you'll see again in this year's FY15 proposed budget. If this one comes off the list, yes, engaging and improving is in our DNA, it's what we'll do, but that project, we would interpret that as you don't want us to go forward on that project. So I would leave this one on the list at least through 2015 when you can see the budget implications of what we're proposing for that improvement.
That's great. I would agree that that one definitely should stay on. I think that's one of our main roles as a public service and safety organization, is to continue to let our residents know what we're here to do for them. The conversation about mayors and managers, yeah, I get it. We got a year of trying to change the DNA there. I'm still not 100% sold that there'll be a huge DNA swap over there, but we'll do our best. We have had some good steps.
Couple of refi opportunities.
Better than not having them. And I do think, though, that I guess you've really answered my question about the lead role in partnerships. We have been over the top with that, and I think our community, our municipality looks very similar to some, but I think the way that our community sees the village as kind of the, how should I say this politely, maybe the lead organization. I hope that we can continue to be that way and help our DNA filter down to the other municipal organizations in town and still continue to work with them very well, as I know you will. So from my perspective, I don't know that necessarily frees up any room on the list, but I do think that this process and this setting of a list and this kind of review of it allows us to see where we were, where we are, and where we're going. As the policymakers, we get to kind of make this list and then watch it happen. I think that watching it happen is hard sometimes because we don't have the benefit of being day-to-day here at Village Hall seeing it, but these kind of updates are important to me because it lets us know where we are. And knowing that there's things coming and we're going to hear them and see them soon in the budget is extremely helpful for me. I think the list is good. I think we had a lot of conversation and we narrowed it down from a longer list not too long ago. And I look forward to completing it. I will throw in, the food truck thing is interesting to me. I wouldn't be against hearing what staff thinks would be the projected timeline or deliverable on something like that. I don't know if it rises all the way up to a high priority action item yet for me. I know we talked about that at our last action item meeting. But it seems like everywhere I've been, starting in July until even a couple of days ago, there's food trucks everywhere I go. They're following me around, both here and in other states. Not literally not in Downers Grove, though, everywhere else. For those of you to know that I don't usually travel outside of the village limits, it's kind of a surprise, I think. But
There is life outside.
I know.
You do realize.
I had a good taco at one of them, but it's just, I think that's something that would be worth a look at, not necessarily throw on the list yet, but hear a little bit more about.
So what's interesting about this one is this is an ordinance that's very, very easy to write. And in fact, staff could put something forward very quickly. If there's complete agreement of the details of the ordinance, and it sails right through. If there's a public discussion about the limitations, where could food trucks operate, under what conditions and when, and what permits, and who's going to administer it, and what's the cost of the license, and how does it relate to the cost of opening an if you get into all those discussions and there's a variety of opinions in the community and the council, then it could elongate, not because it takes a long time to write the ordinance, it takes a long time to set the policy.
So that's a good example of what we could think is an easy one, foul ordinance, that goes down the road of community impact and community interest.
Let me jump in, that's a great segue. Foul ordinance, if we didn't do anything but learn from the foul ordinance, then we all ought to go home. That was absolutely ridiculous. I would suggest that the 7 of us exhibited crappy leadership in the community by letting that thing take better part of a year. There are 100 items, probably, if we went around this table, that people here have that are important to them, whether they're food trucks or LEAP programs or right-of-way ordinances or whatever. If we're going to let everything we want to have done turn into the rewriting of a constitutional amendment, we probably should seriously consider about limiting our time. There's no reason to come meet every week and basically have a 90% consent agenda and check in on staff's progress. Staff's doing good work. That's evidenced every day. We don't hardly need to check it. This list is, a third of this list is stuff that I would suggest is using the word project is kind of ridiculous because you're doing it. A couple other things need to be clarified. I think, Dave, you should make a point of, like with the CRM thing, for instance, let's make this list a little more descriptive so that it's more meaningful. But we can't continue I can't think that we're doing a good job by continuing this process when the list remains more or less unchanged, but for a couple of items, and contains things that we've got to do every day. They're not priority action items, they're not even optional. Where we can just decide that, you know what, we'd like to do a food truck ordinance, so we're taking off negotiating labor contracts? Come on. We have to talk to ourselves a little bit more seriously, I think, about the resources we're making available to staff. Frankly, I'd like to have an item be the number one item, which is have staff tell us in the next 2 or 3 months what it takes to get 35 things done instead of 12. Maybe we won't do it, but let's know it. Let's not look at each other every 8 months and say, well, we got a pretty full list. I don't think we can get anything else done. We're going to keep making a little progress on it. If they're maxed out, they're maxed out. I believe that. I just don't believe that that's really doing the best by the community by having this pretty stagnant list. I love that you guys brought up the chicken ordinance, because I'll take as much blame as everybody else, but the fact is, we landed at a spot we were practically at 6 months prior. And we wrung our hands, had a couple of meetings, staff wrote, rewrote, adjusted, met, talked, dealt with each one of us crazy people, so we could land at the same spot, more or less, that we were 6 months prior. And in the meantime, we didn't do 5 other things that each one of us probably wishes was on the list. I think we're doing a lousy job. I think we've been stagnant, relatively speaking. Not that there's not good work done, I'm talking about us. Continue to implement downtown parking plan. Man, I'm glad that's on there. We did the study, we put the plan, we built the signs. What are we going to do, monitor it? Of course we are, just like we do at every school every year. And eventually, 3 or 4 years from now, we'll want to make a few adjustments. Yeah, really? No kidding. That's what part of running municipalities about. That can't possibly be a project thing that stops us from doing new things or investigating new things. You probably can tell, I've got an enormous amount of frustration with this list. I see very little purpose in tonight's meeting other than a check-in, and obviously there's some data that we can get about stuff. Conduct gateway signs. When did we first talk about that? 2.5 years ago?
2002.
Okay, I'm glad that's still on our high priority action item list. Awesome. We couldn't pull off getting a few signs together?
Well, we
The
could.
list is on and on.
There have been
and
multiple
on.
proposals, there hasn't been agreement on it, and there was a thing called the Great Recession, which sucked all the money out of the
When's the
organization.
last time we talked about it, Mayor? There hasn't been agreement on anything. We haven't talked about it. There probably hasn't been. You're right.
It's a list of items. I'm not disagreeing with you, Commissioner. It's been what you gotta understand something is there's 2 things that are very important. Number one, you gotta have consensus in this room.
We have to talk about it to have consensus. We
Yeah,
have not
you
had a
betcha.
conversation
You
about
gotta-
gateway signs in 2.5 years. That's not happening.
That's not true. It wouldn't be on that list if we hadn't talked about it.
To put it on the list, we could put 45 things on the list. If we collectively
Sure.
don't talk about something,
Sure.
we're never going to make any progress on it. They'll just keep rolling
I
over.
disagree with that. I think we need to talk about it in order to give direction for staff to do it. And as everyone has stated, yourself included, best thing we can do is set good policy and get out of staff's way. And then good work gets done. You just said it yourself. These things are getting done, and we don't even need to be here.
Yeah,
It's a check-in meeting. That means things are getting done because we set good policy,
And this is the
supported by
limit-
the community, and staff is getting it done. It's
This is the
becoming part of
limit
their
of our, if
DNA.
this is the limit of our work.
Nobody's
I
saying it's the
suggest
limit of
that
our
We're
work.
not doing anywhere near enough for the community, on behalf of the community, that we could be doing.
No.
And what I would like to see, I'll only say one thing about the list. I've got a list just like Sean's got and everybody
Sure.
probably has. What I'd like to see us do is seriously talk about what it takes to get 2 or 3 times as much stuff done.
Right, so let's just put right up there on the table what that is. It's adding more staff to this organization.
Yeah, maybe it is.
It's
I don't know,
about,
maybe
it's
it
about
is.
new revenue streams. It's
So-
about additional staff. It's about growing this organization
So you
back
want
to
to
the
have
size
that
it was.
conversation tonight?
No, let's identify what it is we're talking about. It's more money, more personnel,
Right.
more facilities, more revenue.
Right.
We can have that conversation as a
It's
community.
not necessarily about any of those things, Martin. There was a time here 4 years ago when we basically took a whole lot of cost out.
That's right. And there's a
we
lot of
could-
people in this room that'd like to put some of those
So
things
we
back.
could-
I had a
we-
conversation with a
we
mother
could
out in the
put
hallway
some-
about bringing Dare back.
We could
have
put
that
some of those
conversation
things,
too.
we could put some of those things back. They can happen in different ways. If you're truly operating in lean, your evaluation is about everything you're doing. Maybe it doesn't need to be done tomorrow. So it's about trade-offs. Might it mean more revenue? Maybe. Not necessarily. The assumption that somebody has to raise additional revenue in order to do more work is nonsense. We're talking about a very narrow scope for the last 2.5 years. That's what we've talked about. This list has more or less kind of rolled forward with 2 or 3 adjustments at the bottom for 2.5 years. And we're talking about, well, let's make sure we get past the next election, because, God, we don't want to make any conversations at elections.
Well, actually, no one has used the word election yet.
It's.
Staff simply made a
It's because
very-
staff's trying to be pleasant. We don't
No,
have to
no,
be so
no,
pleasant to each other.
no.
It's an election question.
No, it's not an election question. If you think that there's nothing up on that chart that isn't going to be a topic of election, you're crazy.
But Mayor,
There's some very important things. What staff said, Commissioner, was this, is if there's 4 different people in this room come next year, that list
Why would
might
that happen?
change.
Why would that happen?
Why?
Yeah.
Because you got 4 new people in here to create a majority and change the
Why,
list.
why would that happen?
What do you mean, why would that happen?
Because there's going to be an election.
I think
You don't have to use the word.
It's just a practical reality. But to suggest that that someone is fearful of having a conversation because we're 9 months away from election is balderdash.
I think Bob just asked for kind of an extra thing. You and I both just talked about food trucks. We just talked about things on the list already. I think, and Bob will correct me if I'm wrong, the question is, can we get a little bit more information on what it would take to do more things? That seems like an action item.
Now, that's a
Question.
vague question. What you first have to come up with, let's go back to the stormwater utility, let's
But
go
so
back
is
to
kind of
anything
the food
else.
truck. I mean, Dave
No,
explained.
no, 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 no,
There we
no,
go.
no, hold on a second, let me clarify. We gotta find out, I think Bob will agree with me on this, we know what the stuff is first. We can't ask staff to go find out what it would take to do more stuff unless we identify the stuff. So the first thing we gotta do is what is the stuff? And I hear you, Commissioner, we all have our lists, and you know what, there's people in this room that have lists too. And there's people outside this room that have lists too. So yeah, we gotta have a conversation about what we're putting on the list, but we gotta know what the stuff is before we can go and start talking about what resources are necessary to make those things happen. That was the mistake the county made when they started talking about stormwater. They just wanted to talk about the money first before they talked about the projects.
To this point.
Let's identify the projects.
To this point, it's been a chicken and an egg conversation that we haven't entertained, which is, we have all come up with our list, and we've kind of tossed them in the heap, and we've said, okay, but we really can only do X number of things. And that we haven't extended that conversation to being, how would we do more things? Do you have to identify all the things? You're probably getting some idea of the
Yes.
scope is important.
Yes.
But it isn't just that, because these things should be changing. There's going to be, if we were doing this with a much longer list, you would expect that list to change more over time, too.
Yes.
And it's not. So the definition of exactly what they are, food trucks or leaf ordinances or right-of-ways or whatever they are, shouldn't be nearly as static as it's been. So could it be helpful to get a list from everybody to understand what might we be trying to evaluate? Yeah, but I wouldn't get too hung up in what that list is.
No, and I'm not suggesting this is Occam's razor, or not Occam's razor, but Loki's wager, excuse me, wrong fallacy of logic, where you can't solve the problem because of a failure to be able to define it.
There's a little bit of that,
I'm
though.
not-
When you say you gotta know what the list is, there's a little.
Well,
bit
but
of
if you're going to
that.
ask staff to come back with a proposal as to how much extra money or resources or personnel is going to take to do X, you have to have somebody with X's.
but Mayor, can I interject a point here?
Yes.
My understanding, when I went through, and this is my first time going through this process, and so maybe I'm a little, I'm still a little bit new. But my understanding when we went through this process the first time, was we were identifying items, that these are going to be the priority action items for the 2 years of the council, 2013 to 2015. And these are going to be the priority items. What we're doing today is a check-in on these items. Are we still doing the right things? Do we still agree that these are items? I think we can have some conversation, but my understanding, coming into this meeting, my understanding, talking with staff, talking with Commissioner Newstead this morning, that we were going to talk about how are we accomplishing the items that we set forth, that we sat down and we had the discussion and we set forth, these are the items we want to consider. So, I'm very pleased with what the progress we're making, but these are items that take a long time, and with respect to some of the issues like food trucks or this or that, and to me, food trucks, I think we need to engage the community. It's something like when we talk about facilities planning, this is an area where we're going to need to engage the community, and staff is already doing a great job of finding new ways to engage the community with these YouTube videos and such. I think that's fantastic, but that takes time and effort. And my understanding when we went through this process was, this is the plan for the next 2 years. Obviously, it's not static. It doesn't need to be set in stone. If other things have risen to the level of priority, we need to replace it. But I think we have to recognize that that was the intent of the plan, and that was my understanding when we set forth.
So Downers Grove, in its leadership position of innovation and ingenuity and trying to lead municipal policy, can't find room over 2 years to write a food truck ordinance? Because God knows we might have to have 9 public hearings about food trucks? Really?
Well, I
That's-
think
that's-
I don't think that's, I don't,
question.
That's
I don't think
nuts.
so.
I think it's crazy. I think the chicken ordinance should have served as a learning lesson for us about how not to do policy.
Yeah. Well, look, we all would like to have gone back and done that differently, myself included. I don't disagree with some of your frustration expressed about that, but let's also keep in mind that there was an exceptional amount of public input on that. And I go all the way back to the open burning ordinance 10 years ago, where something as simple as, gee, what are being the rules for whether someone can put a couple of dry logs into a chimney in their backyard should have taken 5 minutes in the village attorney's office. It turned into 6 months of Boy Scouts versus asthmatics. So you can't lose sight of the neighborhood and the community, and the community expresses that kind of interest in the topic. You betcha it's our job to listen to it. Could we have been more efficient about that? Yes. Do I wish I could go back in time and have done that a little bit differently? Yes. Should we learn from it? Yes. But sometimes when the community steps up on an issue and says, hey, we got an opinion on this, as elected representatives, I think, this is my opinion, we need to stop and listen to them. And if it takes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, that's the community speaking.
Yeah, nobody's going to sit up here as an elected official and say, geez, I don't know, Mayor, I don't think we should listen to the community.
And I wasn't suggesting that was what you're saying.
But
It's like
that
that,
seems
I
to be
think,
the bulk of the
elongated.
point,
No, it's
is
not
that
the
we
bulk of
need
my
to
point.
be taking that
The bulk of the
information.
point is that was an example of where an issue that could have been resolved very quickly didn't, but I don't think it's because of failure of leadership or anything you did or I did or anybody else did. I think we were responding to what was a very vocal influx of opinion from the community. And you know what? Yes, that brought things to a grinding halt, it slowed things down, and there was a lot of discussion. Could that have been truncated? Sure. Should we learn from that process and apply it to other situations? I agree with you 100%. But
So-
sometimes, the flow of the community will take you a little bit off course, and sometimes that's okay.
Sometimes if you lead, you ought to try and bring them back. It's not about,
Yes.
it's not about just hoping the winds of change blow you in a way.
No,
you might have thought you wanted
that's
to
an
go.
exaggeration. That's an exaggeration.
Chickens isn't much far from that. And I'm not the one that said that was an example of why things take so long. Commissioner Olson's just talked about needing this certain level of community involvement. It was used twice by other colleagues here as an example of why these things take a while. If that's an example, that's a really bad one. They needn't be like that.
As I said 3 times, that could have been truncated, and yes, I agree with you, we should learn from it. But the reason why it was even longer than the 5-minute ordinance rewrite was because of the involvement of the community. Yes, and eventually it was brought back, and there were those who didn't want us to even address the issue. But it was finally brought to conclusion. I think we can take lessons from that. And if another issue, whether it's mobile vendors, or it's right-of-way ordinances, or it's dead tree ordinances, or it's the next thing that's around the corner that we haven't heard of yet, yes, I think we're going to learn from that process and try to be more effective about it. Nobody's questioning they call to try to get more things done.
So to that end, there's some logic to the timing of this discussion, because every year before we put together the annual budget for your consideration, we need to know what the priorities are and what the action items are. And the more specific we get in defining the action item, the more specific we can get in allocating staffing resources and budget line items. So the logic to, when we started this 2 years ago, give us about 15 really big projects or so, was, generally speaking, given the amount of resources we're likely to have, without major swings in tax revenues and resources available to us. And that's still what we're operating under here. So the point of checking in tonight is, if you want to change what we're working on, or if you want to add things or what have you, we need about a month to go analyze them. If they're on the list, we'll show you in the budget what we think it takes. So if you put 30 more things on tonight, and they're not well defined, then you may see a large proposal of new staff or consultant time in the budget, and we'll estimate the best we can. If the list stays the same, then we're about done with our budget from the staff perspective, because we've been tracking on this for months now. So that's why there's a month now between tonight's meeting and when the budget comes out. So if you'd like us to add things to the list, and it's going to be substantive changes, we can add a couple more meetings where we can actually talk about what those things are. The key to our success has been making sure that the 7 of you and the people in this room and the staff side have a real good understanding of the scope of what the project means when it gets on the list. So the latest iteration of this last July, we took the time to meet with each of you individually in advance so we could understand what you might say at the meeting. And then remember, we wrote up a little paragraph and we estimated about how long it's going to take, whether staff thinks we can do it with existing resources or not. And that's been the key to our success, is we had iterations of long-range planning where somebody would shout a title of a project. It would not be vetted as to what exactly it is, and the consultant we used would say, I get 4 hands on this, it's on the list.
Or dots.
Or dots, or what have you.
Walk up and
That
stick
served us
stickers on it.
well then, but what we found then is the budgets didn't relate to the strategic plan, and the staff work plan we didn't know what we were doing very well. That's why we thought this would be a good check-in meeting. And if the council wants to take it from a check-in meeting to a broader discussion of, I want to see if we can do more, what do that do to resources, I have things on the list, then what we would propose is bring your list to the manager first. We'll vet it among staff, we'll meet with it individually, we'll understand, we'll write it up for everybody in the community to see, we'll have preliminary estimates of resources. We'd have to move pretty quick, though, because that budget comes out in about 4 weeks. In a perfect world, you'd like to have that framed up and ready to go and reflecting the budget as opposed to trying to do both at the same time.
Appreciate that clarification. I have a feeling people have their lists in mind already.
I think all of us do, yes.
The key to what you said, Dave, is the one that I guess I take issue with. We've been operating for a while now with the idea that we had a fixed level of resources.
Correct.
And we have never really had I don't think we've really had a very serious discussion amongst us about that issue. We've said, well, I don't want to add, I'm not willing to add resources to add a food truck ordinance because it's not that important. But in sort of the grand, more macro level of getting more things done and having more basically ability to have a fluid list, that's really kind of what we're talking about, the
Correct.
ability to have a fluid list. Because come June, come August, maybe December, there's going to be some issue that comes up, and we're going to, what we've done multiple times over the last year and a half is have an issue come up and say, well, and given the list we've got and the constraints that we've placed on ourselves, we really don't think we can make an adjustment. And what's been said is because something would have to come off. It's not been the discussion, the debate, the serious analysis from us about what it would take to have more available resources, basically to have more flex available in your list. That's what's not
You're talking about
happening.
manufacturing capacity, to put it in your world.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
If you-
we've been operating basically just-in-time delivery for a number of years now, driven by the harsh and necessary decisions that had to be made because of the Great Recession. We haven't had a lot of manufacturing capacity.
Where we've gained efficiency, we've actually tried to do the same amount with fewer resources. The other way to look at it, and rare occasions we do, for example, we've done more enhanced snow and ice control with a little bit more resources. That's been one exception, but when it comes up, we've done it. If the council would like to talk about both of those items, we certainly can do it, which is, trying to bend that cost curve and keep this stable, or you can talk about capturing the bend in the cost curve, keeping revenues the same, growing capacity, growing revenues.
We've
We can do
danced
that.
around service level, too. We've had that conversation in pieces, but never really in depth about is service levels okay? Should certain areas in service level, are we willing to live with less? Does that trade-off mean more? And what it prevents us from doing, when we have this, I think, borderline artificial cap on our resources, is it prevents us from, at least the group of us, I know staff works on things on the side and that come to themselves, but of what if and things. Because to research something obviously takes a bunch of time. And so we end up blowing by, I think, some opportunities because we kind of tell ourselves we don't have the time or the resources to really study that. You can't just make some radical decision without studying it, that's fair. But if we say to ourselves we can't get into it because we've got this list, we're missing stuff, we're missing opportunities.
I would agree. I think sometimes we inhibit our growth and progress by the list. And when someone in the community asks you, how come I can't have a stop sign on my corner? Well, you're not part of the neighborhood study until 2016. I mean, while I understand the process and I get that we have priorities and we can only do so much, that's a little bit hard to explain to someone who just wants a stop sign, that there's a process and we have to go through it. I worked for someone at one point, he was a great boss, and he said, I want all my employees to feel like this is your own business. You operate that way. And when you have your own business, you grow and change as the economy changes, as the environment changes, as everything changes. And I don't know if we're giving ourselves the opportunity, or the staff, I should say, to do that. We don't have an opportunity to react quickly when something changes because we are kind of bound to this list and work plan.
But I think we do have an opportunity to react, and staff has reacted.
Well, let's identify some examples of where that's happened.
Think about the April flood event. I mean, that wasn't that wasn't a high priority action, but that's, we conducted activities. I would suggest, I would disagree, I mean, that staff is able to react when there are needs in the community, or when different projects come up.
Well, when the food truck, there was a gentleman that came and spoke to us about the food truck, and the food truck thing is not a high priority, we need to act on it now kind of item necessarily. I do support it. I think we pretty much said this is not on our list, so once we have a new list, we'll talk about it
I
again.
asked for it to be done tonight.
That's what, I mean, personally, I don't think that's something that's a high priority that we should talk about, because I think it requires.
There's the process, everybody agrees.
I guess I interpreted it differently. I thought that this was something that if we told staff, or at least there was a majority of us that told staff, let's do this, they would inform us, well, something else is going to take a hit, but they'd get it done.
Right.
But I think what
Absolutely.
Commissioner Barnett is saying is that's unfortunate that we're not progressing because of the list and the square box.
But we can, if any four
We
of
can
us
change the box.
decide,
Sure we
This
can,
is-
but, sure we can, but nobody's gonna sit here and say, let's take it to the crazy extreme. Nobody's gonna sit here and say, you know what, we really gotta get the food truck ordinance, so I want that done, let's skip the next contract.
well, no, but we could say, well. the
Every
food truck-
decision-
Hold on a second, what I heard tonight is if it was a simple ordinance,
That was
that
a-
wouldn't happen.
There was a ridiculous example, but the point is that all of us are trying our best to work with each other and in conjunction with what we've set out. And so it's very hard. Any one of us might have an issue that comes to mind. And people are reluctant to push something because we know that you can't realistically say, I'm going to pick on Sean because he's sitting next to me. I can't realistically say, man, I really want to get this whole leaf thing settled in some sort of an engineering, technical way and truly understand what the options are. Because it isn't higher than any one of these things on the list. But the list isn't long. There isn't enough manufacturing flexibility in what's going on here. Because Sean's going to say, I'd really like to get four of us to say this is important. I can't sit here and do my best on behalf of the village and say, yeah, I want to dump one of these things for leaves. Doesn't mean it's not important. But
That's
every
a
one of us is
value
making that
determination. We make those
judgment.
all the time.
Right, and that's what we're elected to do, as far as my opinion, that staff is doing a great job to allow us to operate in a lean manner. In a way, in my estimation, the fact that we've not had to increase property taxes for operations since 2007, I think is that the year, that's very good news. We are controlling costs for our community, and part of the trade-off to do that is, well, we don't have as many staff, and we can't maybe do as many projects. And to me, I'm very comfortable with how we've proceeded in the past. I'm happy to have the discussion, but I'm very comfortable with this list. I'd like us to continue with these items. I'd like us to, like staff to continue their good work on these items so we can, see more accomplished. I mean, I'm very excited to consider amendments to stormwater management regulations. I think that's a really exciting item. I'm glad it's on this list. But to me, that I think let's continue with the plan and move forward. And I really, from my perspective, I'm very, very pleased with work with staff to control costs and give us the ability to control the cost to our community and to the residents. And that's very important to me, that we are mindful of the economic environment in which we currently are in, even though, it's gotten better than 2008, 2009, absolutely. But it's still a challenge for a lot of people in this community. So,
If there are opportunities that have been, and I will stop monopolizing the conversation, I promise. If there have been what's that?
That's why we're here.
All right, thank you. If there are, and I did ask for examples, if there have been opportunities that the community has lost out on because of the lack of capacity of staff to handle them, then we ought to identify those specific examples, because, for example, if we missed out on a redevelopment opportunity because we didn't have enough people in the plan department to do the review on time, yes, well, then you can go to people and say, well, why do you need to add 2 people to the planning department? Well, because we're missing out on important developments that would help expand our tax base and not our tax rate. Those specific examples, if we have those, we bet you we better identify those. Although I will put it to you that I think that stuff that comes up every single day. And when the review time extends because of circumstances have changed in the community, staff reacts to that on a day-to-day basis and will come to us if necessary and say, hey, I think we need to make an adjustment within the organization because we're not meeting our targets with respect to, say, plan review. The food truck ordinance, I would disagree a little bit, Commissioner. I would not put that in the same capacity, because we talked about that in Canley the first time it came up. I think there were only 2 people who were interested in it. So the question isn't so much whether it's on the list, is there even support for it? There are other issues that have come up. The LEAF program. I'll be the first one to say, when Sean first raised that years ago, I argued against it. So it's not a question necessarily of do we have the capacity within staff to do it. Do we have consensus on this council to pursue it? And I would put it to you, that has not always been the case. There are things that I've put forward that people have poo-pooed. There's things that Bob has put forward, well, probably more for Bob, but things have been put forward that there's just not the support for it. So it may not be a question of capacity. Is there support for it? Because if there's support for it, who said it before? If there's 4 people have support for it, there'll be capacity for it pretty quickly. Let's just put the fine point on the pencil here.
So
that's what we're talking about.
I haven't said
So
a word.
you two haven't said anything. Go ahead.
For this food truck, we got 4 people interested.
It'll get done.
I think some of this stuff, to be honest with you, continuing to improve engagement and communication with residents, I mean, that's an everyday practice here. It's just like answering the phone. I mean, we do it, we're good at it. I think some of this list can be scrubbed. But to what level, I don't know. I just think I agree with what Bob's saying, but I also agree with what you're saying. I mean,
Can't do that.
You just did.
I just did, and because they both have valid points. It's just,
We haven't been really in a position sort of financially as a community and as an economy to have a meaningful discussion about expanded resources.
Like 10 years ago, when the question was, mark my words, this was a question, was actually asked. Go back and listen to the tapes. Mr. Manager, if you had another $1 million, what would you do with it?
Because we actually had it back then. And the thing that I think, I'm getting from this is if we want to remove a constraint of the resource, we always started this conversation with, given the resources we have now, this is about what we can do. If I'm hearing consensus that you would like to have discussion about expanded resources, which means money to the village, which is taxes and fees, we can do that. The best opportunity to do that is in about a month when you see the budget come out. Then you'll have a real good understanding of what things are going up and down, property taxes, fees for service, et cetera. So we could revisit that at that time as
Right.
well.
Although there is another aspect to it, to pick up on something Commissioner Barnett said, and that is, you could stay within the same pool of resources if you start making choices about service levels.
Well, I
Yes,
think to
correct.
that point, I don't think I necessarily hear Bob saying, we need more resources. I think, to a larger extent, what he's saying is, are we being as efficient as possible with the resources we have? And I think if there's an opportunity for us to self-analyze the way we do things and reorganize things, or perhaps it's change service levels, then we need to know what those are so that we can make a determination. And I guess to the extent we're going to add anything with the list, that's the only thing that I would consider.
So the good news there is that we already do that at a staff level, and the reality is we have applied lean approaches to government where we're always running lean events and bending that cost curve, but we've been doing it with this in mind. How can we maintain the service level and do it for less against the backdrop of an ever-increasing slope of personnel costs? It's not exactly what Bob's been talking about, because it's always been try to do what we've been doing at a lower and lower cost as the other things rise in cost. We can present all sorts of ideas on how to capture the savings rather than, how to shift it and grow it. We really haven't been in that mode in quite a while. So I'm kind of taking this all in, and there are techniques and processes we could use to do so. We weren't really prepared for that discussion tonight, to be honest.
Well, what I did hear you say, though, and this is probably what it comes down to, is you said you need about a month to be able to provide an estimate to whomever it is that requests for an item to be done, whether it's on the list, or it's twice the list, or it's 3 times the list. What that would mean in terms of cost, time, and resources. And that could be provided, and then when we go into our budget session, if that's something that we want to do and engage the community on, whether that's something the community is willing to either support additional time and resources, or make a trade-off with other time, other resources or service levels within the community, then everyone will have the ability to have that discussion on an intelligent basis. So would it be appropriate, if I heard you correctly, that if anyone has items that they want to add, if they're not well-defined, define them quickly, and I think they need to be well-defined. I continue to think that things like continue to improve resident engaged communication is not well-defined. That is a day-to-day
You have to look at the
item.
project sheet.
Define it.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. That's defining it. So if you're talking about a specific project that's coming up, then
Yeah.
I think, I'm speaking to us, not to you, that we define it as that, not let's just do something we should be doing anyway, or collective bargaining, which we have no choice but to do.
Correct.
But if it's particular things like a mobile vendor ordinance, or it's, we want to be able to advance through a certain capital program faster, or whatever it is, what does that mean in terms of time, resources, and dollars? And understanding that's either new, or it's got to come from somewhere else existing.
There's a, lean is not only cost reduction or cost control. It is certainly a likely product of engaging in lean activity, is cost control. In some cases it's reduction, in some cases frankly it's expansion. Lean is not cost cutting, they're not synonymous. And what we did a few years ago was very reactionary. It was entirely appropriate, I think, but it was very reactionary. David, you use a great example when you say you've had essentially more or less a flat expense side for the better part of 6 years, and you know that every single element of payroll-related benefits, health insurance, actual payroll continues to go up. It's a totally unrealistic expectation to expect that to continue. Totally unrealistic. If we had one employee, Dave Fieldman, and the only thing he did was manage contracts for every other person that worked here, it's not realistic to believe that the cost of that single employee is not ever going to go up. And if it does go up, then it necessarily draws from other expenses, whether they're capital, debt service, or whatever they are. Upgrading the software, whatever it is. There's 100 things. So it is absolutely a testament to really hard work and good effort. It is also unrealistic to think it's a never-ending line of revenue holding, because every single day your expense side from an employee standpoint, which is 75% of your cost, is going to go up, regardless of how that's defined. So if we're going to sit here and say, within the constraints that we have, within the cost structure we have, we want to know what the best you can do is, I think we're artificially limiting ourselves. That's the problem I have. We've not had that kind of a conversation. And it's uncomfortable? Yeah, because nobody likes to go to the ballot box. I'm sorry, Martin, I can't help. Nobody likes to go to the ballot box and say, I'm the guy that thinks we ought to raise taxes a little bit. Sucks, right? Go ask for a vote after you've said that. But if you have payroll costs, which every company, private or public, has, that slightly increase, then to say you're not going to increase revenue is to say that you're going to let all the other activities slightly fail, a little bit more each year. And frankly, I think that a large part of the challenges that we face are because we struggled with that as a community for a long period of time. Geez, I hate spending money I don't have to spend. And there's a bunch of money I do have to spend because I got to make payroll on Friday. This is a thing, this is two lines that are going to come together, and I'd rather try and address them in sort of a straightforward way that says we're going to recognize those costs and we're doing a great job. And the evidence, frankly, is that we've done a very good job. But at some point, it costs a little more to do something better. It costs a little more to get a little more done. And I just don't think we're really being realistic or honest or doing the best job we can if we're not entertaining those conversations that say what would the resources required be to get a little more done or done a little better. That's not the direction we've given as we've started every one of these conversations. We started every one of them at, if we don't want to do anything to raise costs, what can we do? And that's a lousy place to start. It's not, frankly, not a lean place to start. Because there could be investments you're choosing not to make that in some sort of a long-term analysis might pan out to be cost savings, but you've said, I can't dedicate the resources to studying that. It's
Well, philosophically, I do not disagree that we're never going to raise taxes, ever. That's clearly, you have to, expenses are going to go up, revenues have to go up at some point. However, I agree that we have to continue to evaluate that. But we have been able, through the excellent, in my opinion, work of staff, to control these costs, to still deliver excellent service, to deliver on many priorities over and above running a municipality, just running a police department, a fire department, and making sure the water keeps going. I mean, we are delivering over and above those very, very base services, in my opinion. And we've been able to do it with controlled costs. I am a little alarmed of and not supportive of the idea that, oh, well, we're going to raise taxes a bunch or something like that because, we now have the opportunity, that's not the direction I want to go. I don't think that's the
I don't
direction
think I heard anyone say
say that.
No one's going to say that.
Nobody is going to say that, certainly.
Well, wait a minute, somebody might say that when we get this report back and it says, okay, you want to add another management analyst that can handle one or two or however many of these things, it's going to cost you salary plus benefits for at least 1 year to go through a couple of these action items.
That's why this is all academic
That's
until we
very
get
Greg
to
used,
the
Greg used the word
Right.
important, though.
This is all academic until we
Greg
get to
said
details.
use the word value. I think that's important, and I would suggest that to a large degree, we've not entertained value questions beyond a very narrow scope by self-limiting ourselves from a resource standpoint. There may be things that each one of us comes up with that we dedicate the resources to investigate, and at the end of the day, they're not of good value, and we end up not doing it. But we're not figuring that out.
I take a little issue with that because I don't think it's correct to say that if any of the seven of us thought that there was really some opportunity out there, that there was really some way by investing a little bit more, we could get a better return or save something else or do something better, that any one of us in this room is so shy and so introverted that they wouldn't speak up and say that. I refuse to believe that. That has not been the history. It's not been my observation.
That's
You have
that's
that-
a- that's a
I
lengthy
also-
argument, Mayor,
No,
'cause-
no, it's not.
Yeah,
Let me
because-
finish, please.
because
Because
we're
I
not
also, even
finishing
furthermore, don't think
thought.
that that's the way our staff operates. I mean, we can all count examples of where we've been approached by staff says, hey, I know we got this, but here's an opportunity to do something. Will you guys support it? That happens all the time. I have more confidence in staff in that because they've done it time and time again. But all that being said, so I don't think there's this self-limiting, we've got handcuffs on. Those handcuffs don't exist, only in our minds.
Just heard him.
No,
Described as
no,
a starting
no,
point.
I disagree. I disagree. I think if we each choose to be limited by that, then that's our own issue. Everyone has been bold enough, all of us know how to speak, we all got a microphone in front of us, we've all got social media, we've all got the street corner, the coffee shop, over the neighborhood fence, we all got the bully pulpit, we can all speak our mind, none of us have ever been afraid to do that. I disagree with that, and staff continuously has brought things to our attention when those opportunities arise. We may not decide to do it, but I don't think that that has in any way, shape, or form ever limited them from bringing an opportunity to us for consideration. That being said, I have no problem now or ever doing exactly what Dave said. If you have additional items that we think go beyond what the current capacity of staff to handle is and current resources, let's get that list, as long as they're sufficiently defined, reasonably defined. We'll find out what the additional time, cost, or trade-off is in order to do that. And you betcha, let's have a conversation. Let's do it. Let's engage the community. If the community wants to make trade-offs, you betcha, because we represent the community. If the community wants to provide additional resources in order to get some more stuff done, you betcha. Let's have that conversation. I don't think anyone in this room is afraid of that conversation.
I look forward to that conversation.
I haven't heard a single person say, let's not have that conversation.
Yeah, that was well put, certainly because it can't be argued with. Evidence is.
Those are the points I like to make.
Evidence is we have generally not engaged in it. We've ducked it so far.
I disagree.
Nobody in here is going to say they don't want to hear about what the community might want and how we could do better. Of course not. But we haven't, and things have come up that have been just basically dismissed.
Well, oftentimes though, and I would put it to you, oftentimes because there haven't been enough people in support of it.
Because the people, you say, Bob, do you support, it's getting old to use food trucks, but they'll use it because it's in front of us. Bob, do you support spending the time it takes to get into a food truck ordinance? I don't know. What does that mean? Back to Greg's question about the value. The response has been, it would mean something up here would have to suffer. So of course, I say, nah, given that, no. It's not, it's a chicken and an egg conversation that we're not having.
I don't know
now.
that conversation is taking place in public. That conversation may be taking place in people's heads, but I haven't heard,
It's not
I'll go back
heads.
and listen to the tapes. I haven't heard a whole lot of public conversations out there in that room next door where someone has said, boy, I'd really like to pursue this project, but I've been told something is going to come off the list, and I'm not willing to have the conversation because of that
So am
trade-off.
I the only person here that's had conversations?
I certainly haven't limited myself in that respect.
I've met, nobody else up here has ever had an idea and wanted to bring it up and thought I can't
I'm a rule
push it.
follower, and I just felt like I couldn't bring up things because it would take something off.
Maybe
the
it's,
list.
maybe it's a question of the way the
Now,
conversation.
item
was led
13,
and driven.
council member new business. We do it every single meeting, folks.
And how many do we have, Mark? How
Has
many do we
anyone
have?
felt that they were going to be
Great example.
chastised for not doing it?
We had an item of new business, I proposed an
Last
item of
week.
new business 2 weeks ago. Staff is gonna bring something, I believe, first meeting in September. I look forward to considering it, and it's something that we were able to do.
Believe it, it actually happened.
Right, I mean, when, that's one of those.
Come on, folks.
And
We're
that's
all
an
big
issue-
boys and girls.
That's an
Yeah, I
issue
know,
where.
this is crazy.
All right, we're doing a great job and we'll all.
No,
the
nobody
next
said
month
that.
we'll come up
Nobody
with a
said,
list
you're gonna come up with a list.
in the
We're
next
gonna
month
we're gonna get the
and we'll get
information.
it to Dave.
We'll engage the community. We'll find out what it costs in time and resources or trade-offs. We'll engage the community and we'll find out what people think. And I think like with most issues, what we're gonna find out is that there's more than one opinion. We've all brought up ideas that have been
The
shot
new
down.
business should probably be used a little more by us, I suppose. The process, the reality of the process.
2 years ago, I said that.
Yeah, and it hasn't happened. David's one new business item was pulled directly from the meeting of that night, and that's not typically the way stuff goes. The way it typically goes is somebody here has an idea, and it gets kind of floated around a little bit, and the consideration is relative. You made a point, it's not from the dais, maybe that's the problem.
I think it is.
But maybe I'm the only one willing to speak up and say it, but the premise has been, any one thing that comes up ends up having to be a trade-off versus this list. Maybe that's wrong, maybe it's a bad assumption, but I'm not the only person sitting up here that's thought that, or had that expressed through conversations.
I'll go a step further. That's been suggested.
And so-
But it's our responsibility, if we don't agree with it, to do something about it.
And that's what.
And that's what you're doing tonight. And I want to facilitate that. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't pursue what you're suggesting that we do tonight, which is why Dave asked for the 1 month. Let's get the list, let's get the information, let's not talk about things in the abstract, let's not be academic about it, let's get the information, engage the community like we do all the time, and let's have an intelligent, informed conversation about it. And then the will of the people will guide our course of action. But I don't want anybody in this council to feel they can't bring something up in a new business because it's against the rules, or because they've been chastised in private about not being able to do it. Let's just abolish that thought right now. I don't know how anybody even got that in their head.
Okay.
Any other comments before I open it up to the audience?
No.
Thank you for everyone's patience for being here tonight, and coming with any comments. A little bit more of an animated conversation here than you saw next door. On this topic, I guess it started out with the high priority action items, where we're at, where we're going. I think we made more of a conversation about where we're going. Questions or comments from anyone else in the room? Please, Janine.
I haven't been to council meetings for a couple of years. I used to attend regularly and see what happens, but I have to say, is it always like this for you?
No.
What do you mean by that?
Contentious? I mean, I am tense watching you. I'm depressed by it, frankly.
I didn't think this was being contentious. I think we had passionate people exchanging ideas. And we reached an
But nowhere
end
in
result.
this conversation do I feel, as a resident and a voter, that my opinion, my thoughts about my community are represented here. None. It's depressing.
Can you let me know what views or
Well, and the way
issues?
you talk to each other. I mean, really? This is how my government, my local government works, and this is how you communicate your ideas? I don't see any consensus here. I don't see any understanding of other people's perspectives. I mean, it's very, very frustrating. I wonder, and I wish people could be in this room to understand, this is what happens when you're discussing policy in my community. Frankly, I'm a little bit shocked. Maybe I'm the only one here who feels that way, but I spent my evening with my kids who are homesick to better understand what's happening, and this is what I'm listening to. I mean, God bless it's happening in open ways so all of us can better understand, and maybe you can air the room and put it out there. But it's unfortunate for me, I think, to see this as my first experience dealing with you as a group that's not on the dais, it's not on TV, Facebook, or YouTube.
It actually is on TV.
This?
Yes, ma'am.
That's great. I'm pleased to see that, and I hope others do too.
And, well, they are, and they're hearing what you're saying.
Excellent.
So everyone can judge themselves. Thank you for your comments. Any other questions or comments from the audience? By the way, I'm sorry that that's your perception. I don't think any
I'm
of us...
not at all sorry that's my perception, but I appreciate that you're listening to it.
Well, I take it to heart. Obviously, none of us want to convey that perception.
Thank you, Mayor.
Sometimes we're a little bit more passionate and vocal than other times, that's all. But as an aside, well, never mind. I don't want to throw any other communities under the bus, never mind. But thank you for sharing that, and again, sorry that that's been their perception. Other questions or comments? We're not foreclosing any further discussion here. Anything else from anyone else in the audience? Any final thoughts or comments from members of the council?
Mayor, I just want to comment. I think that this conversation, in my opinion, has been much different than many of the conversations that we've had over the past year or so since I've been on the council. My hope is moving forward with everybody here is that we can take some of these thoughts and ideas and perhaps continue to communicate more. And I think one of the senses that I'm hearing is that perhaps there's some ideas or additional ideas that council members want to express that maybe we haven't been expressing to one another. And so I certainly would like to make an effort both at meetings, at future meetings, but also personally and with one another to, if there are ideas, I'd like to hear some additional ideas. I personally was a little bit surprised coming into this when I talked with the manager and talked with Commissioner Newstead before the meeting. I expressed that I'm very pleased with the progress in these items and I expected that we were continuing, that everyone else was pleased about it because I hadn't heard anything differently. So I'd just like to suggest that perhaps we have additional dialogue and I think that dialogue is a good thing. And the fact that we're able to come here and sort of, maybe this is a reality check, that, hey, we've been working together for a little over a year now. Are there ways that we can work together better? So we don't have to have another meeting like this that is contentious, and especially, we heard it tonight from resident, that this is perceived to be very contentious and disappointing to at least some residents in the community watching. To me, that's a call to action that, how can we improve? And I think improving the communication, and I think one of the ways that we improve communication is improving communication among ourselves. And perhaps that's something that I've not, I certainly, I'm just as much at fault as everybody else, but I'd like to, take some additional effort going forward to make sure that we better understand one another so we can continue to make good policy, because frankly, I feel that our village is very well run. I'm very confident in our staff. I'm very pleased with the work that they've been doing. I'm confident and pleased with the work that this council has been doing by and large. So I'd like, that's all I wanted to say. I just hope we can move forward in perhaps a more productive manner, going forward, more communicative. and maybe have some additional dialogue. And Mayor, as you proposed, and let's raise some more items under new business, or when we have something we'd like to raise. You know, my assumption when I enter the new business section, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, this is not your assumption. My assumption is if I propose something, like I proposed the item,
Change to the sign ordinance.
The sign ordinance last 2 weeks ago, is that if that's something that's going to require us to change this list or us to redirect priorities, that staff will communicate that and say, hey, you know, or communicate that either at that time or come back to us the following meeting and say, you know, I know Commissioner Olson expressed an interest in this. That would require us to redirect staff resources, redirect
I thought we had the
financial
4-hour
resources.
rule. Don't we have the 4-hour rule?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So
Correct.
how does
We-
that imply with that?
But-
If it's greater than 4 hours, then it would have an impact here and it would come before us.
Correct.
So we've already got.
But my assumption is, if there were 4 members of council that said yes, right, if staff went back to my opinion, if staff went back to that sign ordinance amendment that we pressed and there were 4 votes that said, yes, I'm interested in that. If that was going to stop us from progressing these items, my assumption is that staff would come back and say, hey,
That's what you do,
appreciate
right,
it.
Dave?
Right, that's exactly what we do.
Yeah.
And so that's a great example, because next Tuesday, you'll see that the ordinance writing took about 3 minutes, and the analysis took a couple hours, thanks to Stan and his team on that exact item. If the council says, let's go and do this, and it gets remanded to the plan commission, that'll be our indicator whether it's a community engagement issue, which touches the organizational capacity to make policy. Staff has a role, council has a role, community has a role, downtown management has a role, EDC, chamber. Most of these things are a conversation about organizational capacity, not dollar resources or staffing allocation, most of them. So the food truck issue, as an example, came up when we were just on the heels of a hen ordinance, which didn't take very long to write, but took over a year to make policy through a community engagement process. So we feel the staff's role is not to dictate resource allocation. We think that's your job. We don't set the workload. We think that's your job. We try to set expectations that connect resources to workload outcome. So if you hear staff say, hey, something's got to come off the list, I think we can do a better job of saying, we're concerned that this could be a community engagement effort that stretches our organizational capacity. So don't be surprised at the end of the year that we didn't get to one of these. So we can be more explicit in explaining what our concern is. And it's really all about setting expectations, not controlling or hampering or any of those things, but trying to make sure we're all on the same page as to how those resources are being used. The next iteration of that, and frankly the most difficult community engagement effort, are those slider scale exercises on service levels. Because what that does is that's the most complicated. It's the engagement of the community, it's the dialogue among the council, and it's a heck of a lot of analysis from the staff. The slider scale, I mean, the only one we've really done on that regard, slider scale type modeling of service level, is stormwater. And that, the amount of time we took to set fees and allocate among maintenance and capital, that's one of 300 or so services, and let's look at how much time and energy that's taken. So hopefully that helps understand what our role is, what your role is. You know, I think the proof will be in the FY15 budget as we roll, because it's another opportunity to say, hey, I'd like to explore more projects or different projects or more resources or less resources.
Thank you for that. Mr. LaCrenne.
Just one comment, because it came up there. It sounds to me like it's time for another retreat. It don't only have to be public meetings, they have to be open. But we haven't had one of those.
No, we haven't.
When those are, for those of the public that maybe don't know, those are meetings where the council gets together. They're not talking about specific items, agenda items, anything else. They're talking about the case, us, and their ideas. I think we need to do that again pretty soon. Especially with the budget coming up. Given to the whole thing, I think tonight's meeting, the purpose of it got lost. It was a report back on the 15 action items and where we stood on each of them. I'll talk to you offline about something that's not important. But if we could get that done before the budget process starts, because that's the area where you really gotta be able to communicate and get a feel for where everybody is. But if we can do a retreat, I guess, that's as good a word as any. It's time, but I don't recall when the last one was.
We're overdue.
It's a long time.
We're overdue.
We haven't had one
No.
since I've been.
What- right, no, we're overdue.
Too much.
And whether we get to one before the budget, since it starts in a month, I'm not so sure if that's just
Probably not.
practically possible, but we're overdue. You're absolutely right.
Can I ask a?
Sure, of course.
few questions? So on the improving resident engagement and communication, you had said part of that is like a customer management software that you've talked to us about. Is any of that the mobile app concept that we
Yes.
talked about too? Okay.
Yes. In fact, in the budget, FY15 proposed budget, you will see a write-up of what we think that project looks like and the resources in terms of dollars to develop it and staffing to continue to implement it would look like.
Okay. Angie's List has just created a SnapFix app where they do similar, it's a similar concept, right? You take a picture of the item, and you can prepare it and send it.
Yep, it's all about the back end, which we've learned. There's a ton of apps that can get you that picture of the issue to the village, but does the village have the capability behind the scenes to assign it, track it, move it, touch it, those things? So it's all about the back end. You'll learn more about that as we write up that report.
Okay, and my other question is exploring options for the methadone clinic relocation. So we've explored the options.
Yes.
And if there was any action to be taken, is that something that we have to talk about in the next iteration of the council? Or is that something that we would talk about now?
We could do it right now. The staff did the research on this, and we found the task was to explore options for relocating a methadone clinic located in the downtown. We did explore that possibility of a relocation. Options range from voluntary options to involuntary options. The voluntary options are much preferred, and under this approach, if we were to continue with that, we'd literally just go to the business and property owner and start a conversation about voluntary relocation. If directed by the village council, we will start that process.
Thank you, Commissioner.
In terms of the stormwater management regulations, Commissioner Olson mentioned earlier, I know it's been sort of an important item for probably all of us, I think. Where do we stand on that, and is there an opportunity to accelerate that at all? Because obviously we're talking about stormwater a lot. We had the last meeting discussing the potential for fees, expenses, et cetera. And to borrow, I think it's Commissioner Durkin's analogy, we want to make sure we have the right size bucket.
Yes.
And we don't want the bucket to necessarily shrink unnecessarily. So where do we stand?
Yeah, the project has started. It's a project that says, should we change our stormwater regulations, which right now are more stringent than the county, should we make them even more restrictive than they currently are to address primarily residential redevelopment changes in stormwater runoff rates and volumes? We have done the research on that. We found that Clarendon Hills is currently looking at the same issue. We found that Elmhurst recently made a similar type change in their ordinance. The heaviest workload right now is telling the story of changing a policy level, an ordinance level detail of runoff cubic feet per second into a discussion people can understand. That takes a significant amount of staff time to translate development patterns into something understandable to a non-engineer. We're busy doing that right now. The opportunity to accelerate this is really changing the review process. We had envisioned going to the development community, going to residential neighborhoods, going to the various stakeholders in that process, having informational meetings, going to stormwater management. To accelerate that, we can get very quickly the policy issue to the council. One of the issues here about organizational capacity is that sometimes community engagement efforts, which is one of our highest priorities, actually works against efficiencies of just making a policy and a policy change. And that's what we're really struggling with organizational capacity. So any of those things that require a policy change by the council, can we accelerate it? Yes. The best way to accelerate it is to get it to the council as soon as possible.
But is that the best way?
It is if you want to do it fast.
Right.
Obviously, there's a trade-off.
There is a trade-off there. We think we've gotten really, really good outcomes by using, you've heard me say it a lot in our one-on-one meetings, go slow to go fast. Understand what the issues are by vetting them with stakeholders, in public meetings, in private one-on-ones, collecting all that. Try to put an ordinance out in the first place that has a really high degree of likelihood of getting passed in the iteration that it exists in when it's first put forward. There are many communities that do the complete opposite, which is put something on the table, have a very public discussion. We've done that in our history too. We can do it any way the council would like, but there's certainly trade-offs.
Thanks.
So to summarize then, and to make sure that you have whatever direction you need, and please correct me if I get this wrong, anyone. In terms of the current list, there are items that are obviously completed, but as to the items that are still in progress or have not yet been started, is anything coming off? I didn't hear anyone say that anything should come off. That I heard maintain present course and speed of all those items. I know that I had suggested that with respect to exploring options for the methadone clinic, that we do, as was recommended or suggested, go forward. I don't know, Commissioner Rankin, that's where you were headed with that.
Yes.
Does anyone disagree that we should go forward with that next step?
I agree.
I don't hear any disagreement, so you got that direction. And then with respect to additional items, I think we now all need to get whatever additional items for the list to the manager. You said you need about a month's time, so I'm a creature of deadlines. What does that mean in terms of actually getting something to you?
We'd like it in the next week, if possible, by next Tuesday.
Okay, I have a feeling that everyone at least has a pretty good idea what their item might be. They might need to maybe refine the description a little bit, but try to get it with as much reasonable detail as possible to the manager within a week.
So that we can have a meeting about them publicly to vet them and see if there's support or not, so then it could be put into the budget.
Right, the idea would be to then return enough information to the submitting council member, well, all of us actually, as to what is involved in terms of time, expense, resources, either new or reallocated, in order to accomplish what the project is.
Right. And
So
that just puts it on a table for the budget discussion,
Right.
which is the
And-
ultimate decision.
And then
whether
that
to
would be,
go forward or not.
that would then set the table for a conversation that would be expanding the list, or if necessary, expanding the manufacturing capacity in order to accomplish more things, or some reallocation of resources within the organization in order to get more done.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Does anyone disagree with that approach?
Nope.
Do you need any further direction?
No, sir.
Any other questions or comments?
Nope.
Any final questions or comments from members of the audience? Thank you for your patience in being here tonight and your input throughout the process. It's obviously an ongoing process.
Thank you.
So with that, motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.